Good evening.
Good evening, Rabbi.
Thank you. Okay. So we got to read the tour here a little bit to finish the chapter. So we already said yesterday that the pious people, they fast on Friday, Erev Shabbat. That we covered. And then yeah, so it says like this. אבל אם מתענה בערב שבת תענית חלום, if he's fasting on Erev Shabbat, right? What's the purpose? Because he had some kind of a scary dream. מתענה עד צאת הכוכבים. So he has to fast until the stars come out. Even though he's fasting into Shabbat. כיוון שיכול להתענות אפילו בשבת, because he can fast on Shabbat as well. וכל שכן שמשלים עד הלילה. All the more so, right, he's going to finish it until the night. That's the end of the tour. Okay, that's what we needed to see. Now we can go to Bet Yosef. So it says like this, regarding this that we just read, it says Bet Yosef, Ken Katub Be'agot Perek Aleph Minchot Tanit. That's what it says in Hagaot, Maimoniot, and the laws of fasting. About Tanit Chalom Be'erev Shabbat, he says like this, right? This language. If you're doing a fast because you had a bad dream, scary dream, Erev Shabbat, yesh litanot ad tzit kochavim. So you should fast until the stars come out. So meaning what, you're going into Shabbat. וכיוון שהוא מפני הסכנה, So it says, since because it's because of danger. So what are we talking about danger? That if he had a scary dream, right, it could be that he's in danger. So this is the reason why he's got to fast. יש לי טענות עד לכוכבים, לבטל ולבאר חלום רע. You're trying to annul, right, the evil decree, whatever that's in the dream. In that kilbo, you shouldn't be lenient, he says. Since that's the reason you're doing it, you shouldn't be lenient. So what does that mean? Finish the fast and go until the night. Shema lo ya'il batlo, because maybe right, they won't be strong enough to nullify it if he doesn't do a proper fast until the end of the day. Im lo yitaneh ad halayla, until right, if he doesn't fast until the night. Tedaki afilu b'yom Shabbat mitanim. So he says you should know why, because even on Shabbat we fast for this purpose. As what we spoke about before. The Chatchila, right? The Chatchila, be'agot masheri, but it says in Agot Hasheri, Perek Kama the Taniot, first Perek of Tanit, Katuv b'shem Or Zarua, name it Or Zarua. Tanit Chalom en tzarich lehamtin ad shkiat hachama. So he says when it comes to a dream, you don't have to wait until the sun goes down. Ela miyad b'tzeto mi bet hakneset. So what does that mean? Once he leaves the shul, and goes home, he can eat right away. Right? He doesn't have to wait until it gets dark. Arvit mutar lechol. He's allowed to eat right away. Okay, that's the end of it. Great. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch, and we're done with this chapter. So says Shulchan Aruch like this: In kibel alav nitanot be'erev Shabbat. Let's say he accepted, right, to fast on erev Shabbat. Tzarich litanot ad tzit kochavim. So he does have to fast until it gets dark, right? Until the stars come out. So that means he's going to go into Shabbat fasting, and that's okay. Im lo shepiresh b'shat kavlat hatanit, unless, right, he stipulated when he accepted the fast, ad she'ashlim hatzibur tfilatan, he's going to fast only until the time where they finish the prayers. Okay, that's good. Sounds good to me. So then he goes on in the Ramah. Right. So some say he shouldn't finish it. Rather, when they leave the shul right away, he should eat right away. Different opinion. We did see this opinion in the Bet Yosef. So he says, therefore, right, if it's an individual fast, meaning what? It's not with the community, you should not finish it, he says. Hatov lefaresh can, but he says good to anyway, right, to stipulate that. When you accept the fast upon yourself. So he says, but when it comes to public fast, so there we should really finish it, go until the night. So that's the custom, he says. So it says if it's for a dream, you do have to fast until stars come out. Okay, that's pretty much the story. If you have any questions, let me know. Let's move on. Next chapter, which is Reish Nun. Okay. Okay, great. So we passed all this, right? Stuff. Now we're going into a different topic here altogether. This was more like technical stuff, but now we're going to go into the preparations of Shabbat, which is really, very practical and very important. So let's see what we can do here. So it says the tour. וישכים בבוקר ביום ו' להכין צורכי שבת. Oh, so what does it say, right? A person should get up early in the morning on Friday to start preparing for Shabbat. So in other words, we don't want you to wait till the last minute. Start early. תכתיב, והיה ביום השישי, והכינו משמע הזמנה בבוקר דומיה דאבא, דכתיב, והכינו את אשר יביאו, והבא הייתה בבוקר. So he brings this Gemara here. And it brings a verse, right, which says that they should prepare whatever they bring. So the bringing was in the morning, in terms of what they did in the desert, right, with the man. So so what you should do is, when you bring it, right, start preparing. So then it says the two like this, right? Even if you have several servants, right, who serve you, so you got like a lot of housemaids and stuff. So nevertheless, he should try anyway, right, to prepare, right, something for Shabbat himself. In other words, you shouldn't leave everything to the maids. Do something also yourself as well, because it's a mitzvah, to prepare for Shabbat. Do something, to prepare for Shabbat. In order to honor Shabbat. Like it says in this parak. So it says over there, right, that these big rabbis, would do something to prepare for Shabbat, even though, right, they had, servants, and this and that, and they had, their wife and their daughters and God knows what. Nevertheless, right, they tried to do also something themselves. So there was one rabbi, right, Rav Chazda, what he would do is cut, the spinach, right? I guess that was a like vegetable, whatever they like to use. And yeah, so in other words, he was cutting the salad basically, right? Something like that. Okay. So Rabba Rav Yosef right? So these two rabbis, what were they doing? Right? Chopping wood. In those days, they needed that, right? To bake, to cook and things like this. So they needed to chop wood. So they would do it. היו מבקים עצים. רבי זרע מצטט ציטוטה היה מדליק האש. So Rav Zera, what would he do? He would light the fire, right, for Shabbat. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak mekatef ve'ayel mekatef ve'nafik. This rabbi, what he would do is carry stuff over, right, to bring whatever. Amar mekal Rabbi Yame Rabbi Yaseh mi lo makat pana kamayu. Piresh perush. So now he explains, right? That means that he would bring in, the utensils that were needed for Shabbat. He would remove the mundane utensils for weekdays. Umehem yilmod. So he says you learn from there that what even these big rabbis, right, who are doing something to prepare for Shabbat. כל צווה כל אדם ולא יאמר ולא יפגום כבודי כי זה כבודו שמכבד שבת, right? So he says, you see from these rabbis, like, don't try to say, well, I can't do, this stuff, because I'm too honorable. So we tell you, right? Oh, you think you're honorable, but these rabbis were more honorable than you, and they did it also, right? So therefore, you have no excuse. You gotta you gotta do something for the honor of Shabbat, and that's your honor, that you're honoring the Shabbat. That's the end of the tour. Short chapter. Okay, so let's see Bet Yosef. So says Bet Yosef, Zeh Lashon Shibur HaLeket, right? This rabbi brings it down. Amar Rab Chazda, he brings this Gemara, right, from Shabbat. Kuf Yud Zayin Amud Bet. Leolam yashkim adam leotzat Shabbat. So he says you should get up early in the morning, right, to start preparing for Shabbat. Shneimar, as it says in the pasuk, ve'aya bayom hashishi ve'echinu ad asher yaviu ve'echinu le'altar tanchuma. So that pasuk, right, this verse tells you that they were getting up early in the morning, to prepare for Shabbat. Ve'echinu lemachar, and they would prepare it for tomorrow. Le'altar, I'm sorry, right away. Tanchuma. Amar Rab Chazda, minayin shekol motzi yatzia Shabbat mitzvah sheashkim beotzi. So he says, how do you know that a person is going to go, and spend money for Shabbat? He should do it early in the morning. Mishachrit, from the morning. Shenemar ve'aya bayom hashishi, because of this verse, as we said. V'darshu chachamim en ve'aya ela miyad shenemar. So he says that means right away they did it, early in the morning. Ve'aya ki kama palishti, like it says in this pasuk about the Philistine, which was Goliath, and he got up. Amar Rav Zeira, afal pi shemotzi adam erev Shabbat mishachrit mitzvah sheosif ben hashmashot. So he says, even though he already did something in the morning, it's a mitzvah to do more also in the afternoon. So what does that mean? Go buy more stuff, if you need more stuff, whatever. Shenemar, mishneh, at kenashono shibur leket. Katuv b'kolabo, right? It says in the kolbo, umashchizin asakim. It says also, we should sharpen the knife for Shabbat. B'chol erev Shabbat, right? Every Shabbat. Dehachi tanya b'sifri. It says in the Sifri, ve'adata ki shalom alecha aholecha. You should know that your house is peaceful. There's a verse like this in Yov. Zo ashchazat asakin. So he said that refers to the sharpening of the knife. Umatzati katuv b'shem sefer chaya olam. I found written in this book, he says, the muchach la midichtiv ve'echinu et vehu kemo leitim ulemizmarot. So he brings this in his book that it says there that his source, right, is from this verse in Yeshayahu. So what does that mean? This verse in Yeshayahu implies that you're supposed to, sharpen your knives. Okay. In those days, it was necessary to do things like this. Today we don't do it so much. But some people still do it. The older people, the older generations, they still do these kinds of things. Okay, great. So that's the Bet Yosef, very short. So let's go to Shulchan Aruch. So שיש Shulchan Aruch over here, ישכים בבוקר ביום השישי. as it said, we said, right, get up early on Friday, to prepare for Shabbat. Even if he has several servants, right, to serve him, ישתדל להכין בעצמו שום דבר. He should try to do something himself as well. Don't just don't just rely on your maidservants, right? Try to do something yourself. כי רב חסדא היה מחתך הילד דק. So he says because Rav Chasda, that's what he would do, right? What would he do? As we said, right, he would cut the vegetables. ורב יוסף היו מבקעים עצים. And these rabbis would chop the wood, right? ורבי זרע היה מדליק אש. This rabbi would light the fire. ורב נחמן היה מתקן הבית. Rav Nachman would, fix up the house. ומכניס כלים and bring in, right, the utensils that he needed. הצריכים. לשבת, for Shabbat. ומפנק כלי יכול, and he would take out whatever he doesn't need. ומהם ילמד כל אדם, so he says, from there you learn, everybody should learn. ולא יאמר, don't say, right, לא אפגום בכבודי, I'm not going to, right, diminish my honor. כי זהו כבודו, because that's your honor, שמכבד השבת, because you're honoring Shabbat. So says the Rama, ויש להשחיז הסכין בערב שבת, also sharpen your knife. כי זהו מכבוד השבת, right, this כבוד of Shabbat. שמכין עצמו לאכילה. He's getting ready to eat. So as we said, right, we don't really sharpen knives today, but but the other stuff is still relevant, right? We don't chop wood, right? But we do the preparations, whatever we need, that's the way it is. So you learn from there, right? And plug it into your own in your situation. Okay, one more here. So another thing, right, which is very important to know, is that it says Yarbe basar v'yayin u'migdalot kepika yecholto. Right on Shabbat, what you should do is, right, prepare a lot of meat, right, and wine, and all kinds of good treats. So meaning what? Eat some good foods on Shabbat, right? The good stuff, the best stuff. Don't eat weekday food, Don't make it into a weekday. Take out some hot dogs and salami. It's not going to help you for Shabbat. You got to get the good stuff. So yeah, that's what we're saying, right? So you get all the good foods. And also the good wines. So let me just make sure we read everything in the Torah. Okay, Torah is good. Let me just make sure we got the whole bit, Yosef. Yeah, we're good. Okay. So let's move on to the next chapter. We're done. Short chapter. So it says over here in the Torah, העושה מלאכה בערב שבת מן המנחה ומעלה, דהיינו, now we're doing a different topic here. We're talking about somebody who does labor on Erev Shabbat. Right? From the time of Mincha and onward, דהיינו ממבב שעות מחצה. That means 6.5 hours from the morning. ולמעלה, אינו רואה סימן ברכה. You won't see any blessing from that labor that you did. So meaning what? It's, a person shouldn't be working at that time. Right? After midday, I should come home and prepare for Shabbat. כתב אבי העזרי, says this rabbi, דווקא העושה מלאכה להשתכר. So that's only if he's working to make money. אבל מתקן הוא בגדיו וכליו, but he can, sew his clothing and prepare stuff for the Tzorech Shabbat, for Shabbat. That's okay, you can do that. ויום טוב, and also יום טוב. משמע מסוף דבריו, so it implies from the end of his words, שאפילו אם אינו עושה להשתכר, even if he's not doing it for profit, for wages, אם אינו עושה את זה לצורך שבת, אסור. If he's not doing it for Shabbat, it's forbidden anyway. Right. כתב אדוני ראש ז"ל, says the Rosh, וכן מי שכותב לעצמו ספרים. Also a person who's writing for himself, books, right? He's a scribe. דרך לימודו, but he's doing it, just like to learn, to write down, his chidushim, his ideas in Torah, mutar kol hayom, so that's allowed all day. Even though writing is a labor, but nevertheless, since it's a mitzvah, you're allowed to do this. So basically, what are we saying here, right? The bottom line is that we only forbid labor, according to this, that we only forbid labor that you're making money, and also, right, or even if you're not making money, it's not, Shabbat, it's not for Shabbat, not for mitzvah. But if it's for Shabbat or a mitzvah, then it's allowed. Okay, that's the whole tour here, very short. So let's go to Bet Yosef. Says Bet Yosef, he brings up right to Beresh Perek Bekom Shenahavu. In the beginning of this Perek, right, Pesachim Nun Amud Bet, Ve'aminan Hatam, we say over there, Daf Agav the Meshamtinan Leose Melacha Berev Shabbat Pesach. So it says, even though when it comes to the eve of Passover, right, Erev Pesach, there we excommunicate somebody who does labor, from Mincha from onward, and Meshamtin Leose Melacha Berev Shabbat. When it comes to Erev Shabbat, we don't excommunicate him, right? And also Yom Tov, we don't do that. So only for Passover, that's the only time that we do that. So it's a little bit different, Passover. It's more stringent, it's more strict. And what's the reason why? If I remember correctly, one time we did this, when we were learning the laws of Pesach, I think the reason was because the Korban Pesach, the sacrifice, was brought at that time, So that's another reason why you shouldn't work at that time. It's like a holiday kind of thing that we're going on there. Okay, whatever. So anyway, right, it says Meshesh Shel Mechza Mala. So he says, right, when is that? It starts from 6.5 hours from the beginning of the day. Ken Katu B'Shem Sham B'Mordechi. That's what it says in the Mordechi. B'Shem Aram, name of the Aram. V'nireh li sheta'amo midem makshinan b'Gemara. So it says, it seems to me that the reason is because since we ask in the Gemara, my area Erev Pesachim. So why dafka? Why are we talking only about Erev Pesach? Afilu Erev Pesach Shabbatot ve'Arba Yomim Tovim. Also, the same thing also should be for Shabbat and Yom Tov. Nami Ushane. So it answers over there. Hatam mina mincha mala asur. So it says there we're saying, right, that from the time of mincha and onward, it's forbidden. Samuch lemincha share. But close to mincha, right, approaching mincha, it's allowed. But here we're forbidding it even from chatzot, from midday. So here it implies, right, that there's no difference between Erev Pesach and Erev Shabbat. Ela shiur samuch lemincha. The only difference is, the time that is close to mincha, right? So when we say samuch, close, right? Danu chatzisha, it means half hour away from that time. That's called samuch, close by. Okay. כמו סמוך למנחה בפרק הרבה פסחים, like it says over there in פסחים. אבל רש"י פירש, but Rashi explains, בפרק מקום שנהגו מן המנחה, in the place where they were accustomed, right, to start the prohibition from mincha time, tet shaot, that means 9 hours, right? Samuch lemincha, what does that mean, close to mincha? Kodem lachem, before that, before 9 hours. So in other words, Rashi says 9 hours, even though the Torah said 6.5. Different opinion. Okay. ונראה לי שטעמו משום דאק כדברי רם. So it says, right, that it seems to me that the reason is because, if you're going to tell me that it's because of the words of if you're going to tell me, like, according to the Ram, Mishum Chatzi Sha'a Chiluk, there's going to be a half-hour difference. Shesh B'neim, there's going to be a difference between them. Lo Hava Shavik Mitne Behu Chatzot. So then, right, it wouldn't have abandoned saying that it's the midday. Kumakom Ika Lemizak, the midak, where he says, nevertheless, you can deduce over here. Amai Piresh Rashi. Why does Rashi say Mina Mincha Tet Shaot? Why does Rashi say it's 9 hours? Right? Harezman Mincha Ktana Lo Have'elat Mitet Shaot Mechza. But it really should be 9.5, right? That's Mincha Ktana. That's a shorter time from Mincha. Ulmala. V'zman Mincha Gedola B'shesh Shaot Mechza. And the big Mincha, right? Mincha Gedola is 6.5 hours. So then why does he say 9? He should say 9.5. That's what he's asking. That's what it says in right in the Gemara Brachot Kaf. So it says, perhaps, we have to say like this. We have to answer and say that he understands it like this. Just like Erev Pesach, you're not allowed to do labor. Right? Half hour before the mincha time. Here also, same thing, right? You got to do half hour before. Maybe that's the reason why he says it like this. The law mefalginan, so we shouldn't differentiate, right? Between one and the other. And then, right, we can differentiate and say, one is saying from Mincha Ktana, one is the big time, one is talking about Mincha Gdola, right, the big time and then small time. One is talking big, one is saying small. Says Umarav Eliyahu Mizrahi, this rabbi, Nireh she'aya gores b'divrei Rashi mina mincha. It seems like his text said, right, of the Rashi, his text of the Rashi, Tet Sha'ot Mechza. In his text it said 9.5 hours. He wrote in this place, right, laws of Pesach. Regarding that which he said, right, that you're not allowed to do labor on Erev Shabbat, Yamim Tovim, and also, right, Yom Tov, Mina Mincha Umala, from time Mincha onward. But Mincha Ktana Aire. So he said it means the later time, right? Mincha Ktana, 9.5 hours. The big dola, because it says, if you're going to tell me it's the big one, the Mishane Talmuda, that was Talmud answered. If it was from there, I would have thought that it's from Mincha onwards. Who the Asur, that's forbidden. Samuch lemincha share, but close to Mincha it's allowed. Hacha mechatzot hainu samuch lemincha hainu chatzot. So then it will be the same thing as close to Mincha and the same thing as chatzot. Therefore, he should have said, Hacha samuch lemincha. One case is talking about when it's close to Mincha. Nami Asur, that's forbidden. Like we're saying in this parak. Rashi, that's what Rashi says. From 9 hours and onward. So he says he learns it from here, right? That's the source. Okay, great. So we'll continue on the Bet Yosef. We'll finish it off. Bezat Hashem. So it says over here like this. Katab Abi Ezri, right? This rabbi says, Dafka ha'oseh melacha listaker. As we said, right? This is coming from the Torah. That he says it's only when you're doing labor, which is for profit, right? For money. The Rosh brings it down. Perek Chet B'Ilchot Yom Tov, right? The laws of Yom Tov. And Rabbeinu Yerucham also, Rabbeinu Yerucham brings it. B'Netiv Hey Chelek Aleph over there. So it says, Umash Katav Rabbeinu Umashma B'Sov Dvarav. And now what the Torah said, right, that it implies from the end of his words, Komar Detarte Bainan. So according to this, right, according to this understanding, we need two conditions. One is Shahim Melacha Shenas Listaker. One is that you're not making money. Shabbat. Also it has to be for Shabbat. Miu Mashma Lid Begadav Kelav Lav Davka. So he says, but it implies to me that it's not only talking about his clothing and utensils. Dehu Adin Legab the Bigde Chavero. The same thing also applies to the clothing of his friend. Kelab and his right utensils. Shemutar letakinan. So you can do also for your friend. But two things, right? You shouldn't be getting paid. Number one. And number two, it's for Shabbat, right? The Tzorach Shabbat. Kol shenu notel aleim sachar. As long as he doesn't take wages, as we said. Okay. One more piece over here. And then he brings the opinion of the Rosh, as we said in the tour. Gam zeh sham. It says that's also written there. Shafa pi shenu tzorach Shabbat. Share, right? So when it comes to what? When it comes to writing a book, right? Which is like a holy Torah book, so it's a mitzvah. So therefore, right, it's allowed, even though it's not for Shabbat. Why? Because it's a mitzvah matter. So implies from his words that he's talking about to learn for himself. The share that's allowed. But if you're doing it for money, right, for wages, no, it's not allowed, even though it's a mitzvah. That's what it says in Mordechai. B'Shem haram, and name of haram. Katav kobo siman nunchet. Says the kobo. Yesh asur lesafer misafer Israel be'arvei Shabbatot. Right. So he says like this, right, that you shouldn't get a haircut from a Jew on Erev Shabbat and Yom Tov. Mina Mincha Mal, from the time Mincha onward. But he says, you know what? You can do amateur job. Right? That's okay, He's not a barber, he's amateur. Like me, I'm an amateur. I'm not a barber. But I do it myself. Okay, so the Lo Gara Bichol Moed, it's not any worse than Chol Moed, he says. So why? Because we say that the Aminan Behediot Tofer B'Kedarko. Because we say over there that an amateur can sew in his normal way, right, on Chol Moed. Why? Because it's not professional sewing. So he says custom is to be lenient, This is also another thing, which is that when you're not sure what the halacha is, you go after the custom. So that's what we do over here. We're not sure 100%, but custom is like that. So therefore, we're lenient. Okay, great. That's a bit Yosef. Let's see Shulchan Aruch. So says Shulchan Aruch, ha'oseh melacha be'erev Shabbat mina mincha umala, right? If he does labor erev Shabbat from mincha time and onwards, He doesn't see any blessing from that, right? From that money that he made there. So, the rabbis already explained, right? What does this mean? There's no blessing. So the definition is like this, right? That if he uses that money to try to make more money, he won't succeed, He can spend the money if he wants. That's fine, But if he tries to do something like to profit from that, he won't have blessing. That money. Okay. Yesh mefarshim mincha gdola. Some say it means, right, mincha gdola, which means the longer, right, the earlier time, which is, as we said, right, 6.5 hours after the start of the day, which is 1/2 hour after midday. Yesh mefarshim mincha ktana. Some say it means the later time, right, which is 9.5 hours. So it seems like he paskins like the second opinion. So therefore, we can be lenient, until 9.5 hours when it comes to the issue of doing labor. So before 9.5 hours, right, the person can be lenient with this. So what does that mean? Let's say, he has a job, right, and he works on Friday. So if he can get out, like before this time, 9.5 hours, he's okay. He's not so bad. When is that time? So now, right over here in my area, Shabbat starts 8:30. It's late. So if he can get out, let's say by 6, he's out of work, he will be okay. At this time of year. In the winter, of course, obviously it's going to change. It's going to be much earlier. Okay, great. So why do we tell a person, to be careful about this? Because we want him to prepare for Shabbat. He should have time to prepare. If he's doing labor all the time, when is he going to prepare? He's not going to have time. When is he going to cook? When is he going to clean? When is he going to do all these things, right? What's going to come out of that? Okay, great. So let's go to the Ramah here. Right? So Ramah says this only applies when you're doing it like, permanently, on a permanent basis. But if you're doing it once in a while, right, just, haphazard, he didn't really, he didn't really want to do this. So it says, therefore, you're allowed to write a letter to your friend, at that time. Right? So it seems like we did, this was brought down in the Bet Yosef, this opinion, but the Shulchan Aruch doesn't paskin like this, but the Ramah seems to paskin like it. So it seems like the Ashkenazim are a little bit more lenient regarding this. So what does that mean? Let me explain to you, right? What does this mean? That they say, it's only forbidden if you're doing it like on a permanent basis, like every Friday you do like this. But if you're doing it once in a while, like just, it happened to be, then it's okay. They're a little bit more lenient when it comes to that. Okay, great. So we have another one here, another Shulchan Aruch. Says Shulchan Aruch in bed, v'taken begadav v'kelav tzorech Shabbat. So what about sewing, right? Clothing and patching it, whatever, right? All kinds of stuff like this, hemming on Erev Shabbat, So it's mutar kol hayom. You could do that, right? If you're doing it for Shabbat, that's tzorech Shabbat, then it's allowed all day because it's for the Shabbat. Same thing also, right, with his friend's clothing. If it's for Shabbat and he's not getting paid, not getting any payment for it, and it's allowed. Same thing also applies, he says, right, as we saw in the Rosh, that he's writing books, for learning. So that's allowed, Torah books, obviously, which is a mitzvah. But he says if he's paying you for it, you're not allowed to do it. Your friend. So he says, then he brings the issue of getting a haircut. So it says you can get a haircut, he says, all day, even right. Afilu besapar, he said, even if it's a Jew. But as we said, right, that's only if well, I guess that it's a mitzvah to get a haircut. Um, for the honor of Shabbat. So I guess we allow it all day. Right, we allow it all day, but it really should not be for money, though, according to what we said. It should be for free. After that time, right, we mentioned, which is 9.5 hours. Okay, anyway, so it says here, furthermore, the Rama, ויש לאדם למעט קצת בלימודו בערב Shabbat. Look what he says, right? You should diminish a little bit, he says, your learning, Erev Shabbat. Right? So what does that mean? In order to prepare for Shabbat, you got to diminish a little bit the learning. So usually, right, what you do every day, or how much you learn, do a little bit less, so you can prepare for Shabbat. That's what he's saying. Yeah. I'll tell you a nice story about this, that I was told that my rabbi Maran, when he was young, what he did was, he used to go pray, early in the morning on Friday, like go to nets, and pray, and he would sit there all day in the synagogue, and learn all day until Shabbat came in. Can you imagine? He didn't even go home.
That's amazing.
True story. So that's what he would do, So why is that, by the way? The reason is because, they say it's a very special zechut to learn on Friday. You know why that is? Because most people are not learning, they're like running around. So you sweep up all the merits for yourself, since nobody else is learning besides you. So it's a very special thing, to learn on Erev Shabbat. It's like this, So the rabbi would just go to the shul and stay there until Shabbat came in, and then he would pray, for Shabbat and go home, eat the seudah. So they say, that he also had a chavuta, right? Was Chacham Ben Zion Bashol, the Rosh Yeshiva Porat Yosef. So he also went with him, He says there was one difference between him and him, right? Chacham Ben Zion, right? He would stop like a half hour, to go take a shower. And the rabbi, he wouldn't even do that. He wouldn't even take a shower. So it's definitely against, right, what we're saying over here in the Ramah. But the rabbi was a special person. You know what I mean? Not everybody's like that. But anyway, right? They asked him a couple of questions about this. Which is number one, right? How is it that you don't take a shower? You got to take a shower for Shabbat. We're going to get into that later on a little bit. So he told him, he says, you know what I do? He says, I take a shower on Thursday night. This way I can stay Friday, like all day in the shul without having to go home.
Wow.
That's what he used to do. But Chacham Ben Zion would go and take a shower, That was the only difference between them. Okay, these were big people, what can I tell you, right? The big people of the land. Okay, so right, there's a lot of stories about that, by the way, about the rabbi, what the amazing things that he did during his lifetime. Anyway, right, the point is, but the Ramah says, you know what, try to prepare a little bit. So how do you reconcile these two approaches, right? So the Ramah is talking about where, you don't have anybody else, right, to help you. So then you got to do something also yourself. But if you have people to help you, and you're not really doing anything anyway, so might as well go and learn, right, whatever. There's also another question, right, which is that we said that a person also do something himself for Shabbat, So then what was he doing? So I guess the answer was he was doing it Thursday night also, that also he was doing Thursday night. doing something for Shabbat, and that was it. So yeah, that's these were big men, big people. Baruch Hashem, we were zoche to see them, to see their conduct, how they behaved. We had the zechut to see them and to see how and we learn from them so many things. You learn more from examples sometimes, than you learn from the books. You look at the example of the rabbi, how he behaves. Okay, very good. So I guess we'll stop here, Bezrat Hashem. We'll see you next time tomorrow. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chazak u'baruch. Laila tov. Next time we'll start the next chapter, Bezrat Hashem.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
God bless. All the best.